Yes, I am the speaker chair for February. It's a privilege and an honor to have that duty, but at the same time it's a very heavy responsibility. I have to, in light of the tradition of our association, Engineers and Architects of Hawaii, the tradition of only asking the best and the brightest of the men and women of this community to speak, but that heavy burden was lifted from my shoulders when Bill Leary agreed to talk today. Bill is no stranger to the EAH. In the past, he's spoken on his missions as a naval engineer to keep the gray Phaetons of the sea fit to fight. Most recently, he took us through the islands, our own islands, in the wake of Kotzebue and Slaperus. And Captain Cook. And now, through the miracle of PowerPoint, he will take us to the South Pacific in search for that unspoiled paradise, which Gauguin searched for and did not find, Thor Heyerdahl searched and did not find, but they are not Bill Leary. Please welcome Bill Leary.
What do you say to one of Mac's introductions? It's great to be back here again. I think, Mac, you mentioned last time I was here, I think I spoke about our trip around the state. I retired last year after 36 years working for the Navy, and decided that the first thing I needed to do in retirement was to go cruising to the South Pacific. So this past June, we took our 35-foot sloop, Moku Pe'a, down to the Society Islands. My wife, Lori, who's sitting here in front of me, doesn't like open ocean sailing, so she got the princess ticket and got to fly both ways. But my 19-year-old daughter, Kara, who sailed with me around the state when we did that cruise, was always game for an adventure, and she sailed down there with me. Moku Pe'a is the name of the boat. If anyone has any questions or comments, please feel free to jump in at any time. Moku Pe'a means sailboat in Hawaiian. When the Hawaiians first saw Captain Cook come over the horizon, they couldn't believe he was on a boat. They thought it was a floating island. So Moku is island, and Pe'a means cross. So they saw the island with the cross coming over the horizon. That became the word for sailing vessel or yacht. And in Hawaii, we name our dog's dog and our son's boy or son. So I figured it was appropriate to name my boat. So here we are on June 23rd of last year, sailing out of Kaneohe Yacht Club. You can see some of the modifications we made to the boat to make it more cruise-worthy. I have a wind generator on the back of the boat, a bimini and a dodger for spray. These are called weather cloths to keep water out of the cockpit. This is called a door-rayed ventilator, where air can go in and it goes through baffles to keep the water out and just let air into the boat. And I also put in an electric autopilot and designed and built my own self-steering vane to steer the boat in case the electric autopilot didn't work. We already have one reef in the mainsail. That's where you reduce the size of the sail. It was a windy day, and it was foretold what was to come on the trip south. This is our track on the trip south to Tahiti. Here's the equator in red in the middle here. You can see that Tahiti is a little bit closer to the equator than we are, and a little bit to the east. And in the North Pacific, you have trades from the northeast, and the South Pacific from the southeast. So the challenge is to get far enough to the east so you can make it to Tahiti without having to tack. It took us 17 and a half days to get there, and it was quite a windy trip, a little windier than normal. One of the only, besides the heavy winds, the only thing that was remarkable about the trip was a lack of doldrums or intertropical convergence zone. Sometimes it's 250 miles wide, but when it was only about 20 miles wide, and we had to power for 4 hours. That was it. This is a screenshot from the laptop computer with navigation software on it. The world has changed since I first started transoceanic sailing back in the 1970s. Back then, you'd use a sextant and a chronometer, and sometimes you'd go a week to figure out where you were if it was overcast. Now it's charts are on the laptop. You use GPS, and it updates your position every 3 seconds. You know where you are within just a couple of feet. So it's really quite different now. I never even pulled out a paper chart the whole time we were sailing. This is how we communicated. Alan Lloyd was worried about safety, so he bought us a sat phone, which plugs right into the laptop computer. We could upload and download emails and weather files, and if we had an emergency, we could call and use the sat phone. So it really is a very handy piece of safety equipment to have. This is what it looked like for most of this trip south. The boat was heeled over on port tack, rough water. You can see how wet it is in the cockpit there. quite a rough trip. Kara was seasick for the first 3 days, but she really was a trooper, never complained, always enthusiastic, willing to do whatever was asked of her. Just to give you an idea of how rough it was, this is a man of war that washed in the cockpit on a wave, so there's lots of water aboard. Just the two of us, yeah, sailed south. So the autopilot steers the boat the whole time. So there's not much to do except keep the sails trimmed and keep watch for other ships. Kara's job, every 10 minutes, her job was to sit up and look around and make sure there were no ships on the horizon, or if the wind shifted or seas changed, she would wake me up and so we could adjust things. This is what Kara looked like on watch, usually flat on her back on the lee side of the boat, reading her Kindle in a gallon Ziploc bag so it wouldn't get wet. She's strapped into the boat with her safety harness so she won't go overboard. She was really a trooper, even though she was sick most of the way. No radar. No. There's actually not much out there. I've been across the equator 8 times now on sailboats, and the most shipping I've ever seen before this trip was 2 vessels in 2,000-mile trip. So there's not much out there. This trip, though, we saw on the way home 7 Asian fishing boats. So the more fishing boats you see out there is a reason why there's fewer fish out there. They're scouring the ocean for everything. So quite a bit more boats this trip, but in a 2,500-mile trip, to only see 7 boats, it's not very high density out there. We did have some fun. Kara had never been across the equator before, and it's a tradition when you do cross that King Neptune come aboard and to properly initiate the new shellbacks. And so here's King Neptune coming up out of the cockpit. Complete with a beard. And it's also tradition that the initiation includes some hazing. And King Neptune just happened to have a can of Cheese Whiz on him. So Kara, her initiation was a Cheese Whiz bath. So here she is before she had to clean herself up. Gorgeous sunsets crossing the equator. And this is it there in the doldrums. There is quite a bit of sea life still out there. This is a pile of fish feeding on the surface about 500 miles north of Tahiti. When I first saw this, I thought it was a reef. It was so much commotion on the surface. And we did catch some fish. This is a nice little mahi we got a few hundred miles south of Hawaii. We caught a couple of aku as well. Not right between. There's a little bit to the west. Palmyra, Fanning, Christmas, and a few other islands. The problem, though, is if you head to the west to go to those islands, then it makes it that much harder to get to the east and make it to Tahiti. So Marquesas are way to the east, and they're very difficult to get to from here. Almost every morning we'd wake up and there'd be flying fish in the scuppers on deck. One morning we got up and sun came up and there were eight flying fish in the scuppers, and I cleaned them out and threw them over because they're quite stinky. As the day went on, things started smelling worse and worse on the boat, and Kara was giving me dirty looks thinking it was me, and I was giving her dirty looks thinking it was her. And it turned out there were 5 more flying fish that were up underneath the hatch cover and they were sitting there stinking away. So once we discovered those and got rid of them, and everybody was off the hook.
Why would you eat them?
They were very small. They smell terrible. Some people eat them. The larger ones people will eat. I'm not terribly fond of flying fish. The only navigational issue we had was Filippo Reef, which shows up on the chart, and I wanted to sail by it and have a look at it, but we got there rather late in the day, 5 p.m. on the 4th of July, and I didn't want to sail through there at night, so I couldn't make it above the reef, so we tacked over on the starboard tack and headed to the northeast for 7 hours until I could clear the reef and tack back. I've since learned that Filippo Reef, we did some looking on the internet, it's referred to as a phantom reef. It was sighted in the mid-1800s by a whaling ship and has never been seen since. And these other 2 areas are areas of reported breakers in the 1920s and 1940s. Why with satellites up there and cameras on them, we can't just take a look and verify whether it's there or not, I don't know. But the consensus is they don't exist. But I couldn't take that chance.
Well, that's your only real tack on the whole run.
Correct. We were on port tack the whole rest of the time. We did have some equipment issues on the way south. This is a gusset, a triangular piece of fiberglass that holds the rudder post in place in the boat. And it tore free from the boat. I discovered that on July 7th. I was poking around back there and found that it had broken free from the hull, and it's moving up and down about 1/8 of an inch. If that breaks completely free and gets bad enough, then the the rudder post will break free from the boat, water will pour in, the boat will sink. So I was quite alarmed when I found this. Here's a sketch I put together to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. This is that crack we were looking at in the previous photo. So the gusset's this triangular piece. There's three of them, one on each side of the rudders holding it in place transversely, and then one that goes aft in this elevation view here that holds it in place fore and aft. These two had broken free from the hull, so it's moving back and forth. This one's in good shape. I was very alarmed, got on the sat phone, called Leary, and gave him my position and said, hey, if you don't hear from me every 6 hours, call the Coast Guard. It didn't get any worse, and because while one is loaded in tension, the other one is loaded in compression, so it can only move so far. I realized it probably wasn't going to sink the boat, so we just took some load off it by adjusting sails, and we limped into Papeete. After 17 days at sea, it's the feeling you get when you make landfall after a long ocean passage is an experience like no other. And 18th morning, the sun came up, and Tahiti was right ahead of us where it was supposed to be, and you can see Kara's pretty happy about getting there. As we motored into Papeete Harbor, we passed this 150-foot mega yacht. We could tell we weren't in Hawaii anymore. You don't see boats like this in Hawaii. There were dozens of them down there. I don't know if it's rich Europeans or investment bankers from Wall Street or what they are, but there's a lot of money down there. And this was our destination. This was the Raiate'a, just south of the airport in Papeete. You can see it's a very popular destination for cruising boats, pretty packed in there. What's really amazing is that I was there 20 years ago, and it was just like that 20 years ago, packed with boats. But as soon as you get to the outer islands where it's really beautiful, there's nobody there. These guys sail halfway around the world to get to Tahiti, and they hang out in Papeete, and I don't understand it. But I don't get it.
Incidentally, your first shot, that was Tahiti Island.
That was Bora Bora, the very first picture of the slideshow?
No, just now, about 3 clicks back.
Yes, that was Tahiti Island, yeah. Yeah, that's Tahiti as we're coming in. Yeah,
that's 7,300-foot peak.
Yeah, but now I couldn't sail around for 3 months and then sail home with it like that. So I had to come up with a fix that would get me home. I didn't want to. The proper fix is to go in here and reglass it and reinforce it. I didn't have the tools, the equipment, I couldn't get a dock space or anything like that in Papeete. So what I came up with was I went out and bought some Spectra rope. Spectra is very high modulus rope, so it doesn't stretch. It's almost like wire. Stainless turnbuckles, and there's a rib, transverse rib in that area to stiffen the boat. I put a 10-millimeter stainless bolt through there with a Spectra line and the turnbuckle, tightened that up to lock the top of that rudder post in place, and I did the same thing the other direction there, although I don't show it in this drawing. And that took the load off the gussets and allowed us to sail around for 3 months and sail home with it that way. I did an analysis, and it's got a factor of safety of 2 on it with a full broach on the rudder, even if we are going 7 knots. So it's plenty strong enough, and I still haven't got around to fixing it, but one of these days I'll take that off and glass it properly when I get the energy. So here's the bolt through the rib with the turnbuckle and the Spectra line on there. This doesn't go through the hull. This rib is inside the hull, so the bolt just goes. I just used a hand drill in about 2 hours of down there in that tight area to drill that hole. No, it's a bolt that goes right through, and I just have that washer and nut on there to make sure that the line won't slip off the end there.
Take all that with you from Kaneohe?
No, I bought that in Papeete. But if I ever, any more long distance trips, I'll take, 100 feet of this Spectra line. This is fantastic stuff because this is, I believe, 20,000 pound braking strength. Can almost lift the boat up, and it doesn't stretch. It's like wire. Except you can tie knots in it, which reduces the strength by 50%. But so what? It's very versatile, and you can repair rigging with it, or use it for an application like this as well.
That's not Dacron?
No, it's called Spectra. It's there's a number of new fancy fibers. Dacron's just a polyester, and it still stretches quite a bit. But this is very low stretch material. And here's the other end going around the top of the rudder post. You can see here's the one of the gussets that goes down, and I just put a loop around it, and here's the line going the other way. And that's worked great. No chafe, no movement. It's really worked fine. Here's a chart showing the Society Islands. You got the windward group here of Tahiti, Moorea, and Taha'a, which used to belong to Marlon Brando, and the leeward group of Huehine, Taha'a A, Raiate'a, and Bora Bora, which are much older islands. The islands are all about between 9 and 15 miles apart, so they're closer than our Hawaiian Islands in each group. I think it's 9 miles between Moorea and Tahiti. From the windward group to the leeward group is about 100 miles, so it's an overnight sail. It's kind of like sailing to Kauai. The open market in Papeete is a must-see for anyone who ever goes there. It's just a very lively and fantastic open market with all kinds of produce and tourist goods and fish and that kind of thing. This is Sunday morning at the open market when all the locals come in from the outer islands to buy and sell fresh fish and produce. We drove around Tahiti. There's some of the sites. This is a blowhole that empties out onto the highway, so if you time it wrong, your car gets rinsed off. Gorgeous waterfalls. This is Point Venus. This is where Captain Cook hung out, waited for the transit of Venus. It's a nice little anchorage. You can see the boats anchored there. Nice black sand beach. Gorgeous botanical gardens. Now we're over at Moorea. This is Opanohu Bay on the north shore of the island in Robinson's Cove. It's the famous Shark's Tooth Mountain. Many people believe Moorea is the most photogenic of the Society Islands. Moorea is also great for bike riding. It's about 30 miles around, and we had 2 stainless folding bikes that I took with me on my last trip down there 25 years ago, and they're still in good shape, so we brought them along, and one day Lori and Kara circumnavigated the island. You can see Tahiti in the background for an idea of how close it is. This is shot from a place called the Belvedere up in the middle of Moorea, looking out towards Opanohu Bay where the boat is anchored. We hiked up there one day. From Moorea, we sailed down to the leeward group, and I stuck this airplane photo in to give you an idea of what makes Leeward Islands of the Society such a wonderful cruising ground. All the islands are very old. Basaltic high islands have eroded away, leaving a coral fringing reef on the outside, a lagoon on the inside, and then the high basaltic island in the middle. What this provides is great cruising grounds inside the lagoons where the water is calm and the anchorages are safe. This is Taha'a in the foreground and Raiate'a in the background. They share a lagoon. You could spend months cruising around these islands, never go out into open water, and anchor in a gorgeous protected anchorage, a different gorgeous protected anchorage every night. It's kind of like having Kaneohe Bay that extends all the way around Oahu, if you could imagine what that's like for boating and sailing. The trade winds are lighter down in the South Pacific than our trade winds up here. So we did have wind. In fact, the wind, we were there for 3 months. The wind was out of the eastern quadrant the whole time, but it's generally lighter than it is here. So some days it would be 3 or 4 knots. Some days it would be high as 15 knots. Not as quite as strong as we get here. So it's just gorgeous cruising. Temperature, we're down there during their winter, but since they're a little closer to the equator, it's still nice and warm, and the water's nice and warm. So it's really nice cruising. You want to avoid hurricane season is what you want to avoid. You want to be down there between April and November during their non-hurricane season. There's no place to hide during hurricanes because there's no harbors to go into. Here we are sailing one day between Raiate'a to Taha'a. You can see just how flat the water is, and with Bora Bora there in the distance. And here we are at happy hour at anchor off of Motu at the southern end of Raiate'a. This is shot from Taha'a looking towards Bora Bora to give you an idea how close the islands are. Behind these bungalows here, between the 2 motus, is a great snorkeling spot called the Coral River. Lori was out there diving one day with some guys from New Zealand. She bumped into Gwyneth Paltrow diving the same spot. There are no docks to tie up to in French Polynesia. We anchored every night for the 3 months we were there. But you can tie up to the dock here in Raiate'a for a couple of hours while you rush in to do your shopping at the supermarkets that are nearby. You can see Taha'a in the distance over there. This is a dock at Whare in Huehine. Just a gorgeous spot. Diving is fantastic. The water is warm, it's clear, full of sea life. These underwater shots were all shot with a disposable camera that Alan Lloyd's girlfriend Betty Lou gave to us before we left. You can see how clear the water is here. This is our anchor chain disappearing off, 100 feet or so away. Just very clear water.
What's the foreground
Here?
Between you and the island chain.
Oh, this is the keel of the boat.
Okay.
Yeah, Kara and I are just messing around underneath the boat there. So there's not much tide in Tahiti. It only goes up and down about a foot, so you really don't even notice that as well. No, just about a foot under there, and it's kind of interesting. This is off the east coast of eastern side of Bora Bora, and we traveled about, I'd say, a mile to get to this spot over the sand, and it went from about 10 feet down to about 6 feet over that mile. So it's just great big sandbars out there, but it's pretty safe because it shoals very slowly and it is a sand bottom. More shots. This is the Coral River.
Did you have a thermometer or something?
I did, yeah, and it was tuned pretty well, so I knew exactly how much water we had under the keel. We never bumped the whole time we were there. Lots of shells. If you like shelling, this is called a six-finger spider conch. They're everywhere. Here's a live helmet conch I found near the boat. Lori made me throw it back, unfortunately. Here's these called augers, I believe. These are augers we found right off the airport in Papeete. And here's 4 tiger cowries that were right underneath the boat. I found while diving. We just took a shot of them and threw them back. Just to give you an idea what it's like sailing between the islands, here we are headed towards Bora Bora. Lori usually can get seasick, but it was so calm this day she could read in the open ocean. Hiking was great. There's a really fun hike to the top of the peak in Bora Bora, and here's a couple shots of us on the top. This is looking out towards the entrance channel there in Bora Bora. Cruise ships actually come in here, and the first time I came in that channel 25 years ago and was in the middle of the night, so it's nice and wide and safe. I think the boat is one of these boats anchored down there.
That's Raiate'a down there, right?
Raiate'a, the main part of the town is just out of sight here, but I think this is like the outskirts of Raiate'a. Yeah, we timed it. I didn't put a picture in here, but we timed it so that we could meet Alan Lloyd and Betty Lou when they came in on a cruise ship. We met them on the dock in Raiate'a one day. There's a lot of gun emplacements that the U.S. put in World War II to protect Bora Bora. My uncle actually was part of the crew that installed some of these guns. Canoe paddling is the national sport down there, and it's easy to see why the Tahitians always win the Molokai race. Everybody paddles, and they work very, very hard at it. When you're motoring around the lagoons, the locals will always paddle out and jump on your stern wave and try and surf your stern wave. And here's some of the boys having fun with our stern wave one day.
They do that with the cruise ships, too.
Yeah. It's not all fun and games, though. There's lots of maintenance work to be done on the boat. Here I am re-waterproofing the bimini, fixing a water pump that failed. On the sail south, one of our shrouds stranded, so I had to replace that. Every exterior light on the boat went out. It was almost like underwriter's lab test for electrical equipment on the trip south. We doused and pounded on everything until they broke.
Why did they go out, Bill?
Water. The most dangerous aspect of cruising or sailing is not reefs, it's not storms, it's other boats. And this trip proved that once again. We were anchored off leeward end of Huehine, and this large 46-foot charter catamaran started dragging anchor down into us. By the time I realized they were dragging their anchor, they were over our anchor, and I couldn't get our anchor up to get out of their way, so we kept easing our anchor out as they dragged back until we got to the end of the rope, and I ended up having to tie a fender to it, letting it go. Lori motored around the lagoon while I swam over to help them re-anchor. This crew was ashore having lunch, and the only person on the boat was the cook, who didn't know what she was doing, so I had to help her get the anchor up and re-anchor. Then I swam back to our boat. Everything was put back together by the time these guys showed up again. Other boats are always the most dangerous part of cruising.
Why was it dragging?
They didn't have enough scope out. Their professional captain, who they had a professional aboard, didn't put out enough chain, so there's a lot of windage on these catamarans, and that was a 65-foot deep anchorage, so you don't put out enough chain and the wind comes up, then you're going to drag. Here's just a sunset shot of the cruising crowd behind Taha'a Island on Bora Bora. That's Mapiti in the background. That's the westernmost high island of the society group. It's the only island that of the societies there that has a shallow, narrow entrance channel, so it can be very treacherous. And it's about 25 miles away, so you can sail down there, and if it's a rough entrance at the channel, you can't turn around and make it back to Bora Bora in the daylight. So This trip we didn't go there. I had been there previously. There's nothing like fresh baguette. You get fresh baguette down there every day, good French Bordeaux and French cheese. So we ate a lot of that down there. It was challenging when Kara was there because she's a vegetarian. So the whole sail down, and for the 5 weeks she spent with us down there, we ate vegetarian. That was a little challenging, but I guess it was good for me. Kara, after 5 weeks down there, she had to get back to school, so she left, and Lori and I had a month and a half to ourselves to just relax in the Leeward group and go back and revisit spaces we had touched with Kara. This is our favorite spot. This is on Taha'a. We love Taha'a. It's the least developed of the Society Islands. There's no airport. There's no hotels. You can only get to it by boat, so it's very rural. And you can just see the boat anchored here at the end of Huehine Bay. It's a 2.5 mile deep fjord-like bay on the windward side of the island. Great hiking, great biking, vanilla farms, good restaurants. It was a really nice spot. Fishing boat would come in. There's a dock right here that you can tie up to, and they would come in every afternoon and blow their conch shell when they had fish, and that was the signal to the locals that, hey, there's fresh fish for sale down there. So they'd come in and blow their conch shell, and I have a conch shell on our boat, so they'd start blowing theirs and we'd start blowing ours, and it's echoing off the sides of the valley all the way down. It was a lot of fun, but they had that's how they'd announce to everyone that there's fresh fish for sale.
You were catching fish?
No, these are Tahitians. That particular fishing boat was from Huehine, but for some reason they must have had relatives on Taha'a or something, so they were spending some time there.
It's kind of like a sampan.
In fact, their boats look almost exactly like our sampans. It was slightly different, but they're catching ahi and aku and that kind of thing. Fresh fish down there is much cheaper than it is here. One of the few things that are cheaper than here. Here we are biking around the island one day. I did lots of fishing, didn't catch a darn thing. They call them marae down there. It's similar to our heiau, except most of theirs are built on the coast, and they're all built out of coral, unlike our heiau that are built out of basaltic rock. There's virgins in the waterfalls. Sirens in the waterfalls, sorry. Yeah. We did a lot of drifting and paddling around and just exploring. We had a great time. Many anchorages you'll have to yourself because there's so many of them. After a month and a half of relaxing with Lori, we worked our way back to Huehine and picked up Matt and Vicki Dyer. Some of you may have known George Dyer. That was Matt's father. He was an attorney here in town. Matt grew up in Kaneohe with me, and in the mid-'80s he moved back to Washington State. But he's a great sailor. We'd sailed together many years ago. So he flew down, and he and Vicki flew down, joined us, and we spent 2 weeks working our way back through the Leeward group to Bora Bora, where the girls flew home, and then Matt and I brought the boat back to Hawaii. Matt is a professional fisherman by trade. He gets on the boat. The first day we didn't do any fishing, but the second day he grabs the fishing pole, and within 2 minutes of touching the pole, he's got a fish on the line. So here he is bringing in a nice little grouper. And here we are shark fishing. So the girls flew home, and Matt and I brought the boat home. You can see we made it a little bit farther to the east on the trip home. Trip home was the complete opposite of the sail down. Sail down was extremely rough. It's the roughest ocean passage I've ever been on. But the trip home was just wonderful. From Bora Bora up to the doldrums was like sailing in Kaneohe Bay, not a drop of water on deck, between 8 and 14 knots of breeze, just gorgeous sailing. And we wanted to work our way east because we knew once we got into North Pacific trades it would be quite strong. And we got far enough east so that we could put the wind behind us, and it made very easy sailing all the way into the Big Island. And once again, 17 days on the way home. I mentioned Matt's a commercial fisherman, and he works pretty hard at it. He's always changing lures and sharpening hooks and messing around with it. So we had quite a bit more success fishing coming home. Nice little ono that Matt caught. It was interesting. He was in the middle of his bath when this fish hit, and so I came up on deck, and there's soap all over the deck, and he's got nothing on but his safety harness, and he's slipping all over the place trying to get this fish in. It was quite exciting. Nice little aku we got. We made our landfall at Kalapana on the Ka'u coast of the Big Island. I had sailed up that coast 7 times racing around the state when I was a kid, but you could never stop and look at the volcano. And since we were coming from that direction, I wanted to watch the lava coming into the sea. Unfortunately, in early November, it wasn't entering the sea, so we could see some fires burning up on the plateau, but no lava was coming down. But we did have a nice day sail down the Ka'u coast towards Kona. We made our formal entry into the United States in Honokaha Harbor on the Big Island. Leary flew up there to join us. So here we are entering Honokaha. We spent the next week slowly working our way back to Oahu. It's ironic that the roughest weather we had the whole trip was in the Pailolo Channel between Maui and Molokai. We had about 45 knots of wind, and we picked up Matt's son, Noel, in Kaunakakai so he could experience some of the sailing with us, and he sailed with us back to Kaneohe, and here we are entering Kaneohe Bay. Lori put on a great party when we came into the yacht club at Kaneohe. She bought every bottle of Hinano beer on the island, and did poisson cru and all kinds of French dishes and Tahitian music and decorations. It was just great. Here's the party as we got in. So it wasn't like sailing around Cape Horn or anything, but it was challenging, and it was very enjoyable and a lot of fun. And that's it. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Fishing advice.
I'm the wrong person to ask for fishing advice.
Yeah.
But you got to work hard at it. I do know that. That was built. It's called an Air Breeze, and it's one of the very popular models now. Southwest Wind Power. Well, I don't know. It's a function of wind speed, and it goes up with the square of the wind speed. So it'll put out almost 20 amps if it's blowing 25 knots of wind. We never had to turn the engine on once the whole time we were gone to charge batteries. It was all the wind generator did it the whole time. I can't speak highly enough about that wind generator. It was a fantastic tool. The other piece of equipment that worked flawlessly the whole time was the autopilot. That really made life easy on us because we didn't have to steer the boat. No solar, yeah, but the one thing I didn't have that draws a lot of juice is we didn't have refrigeration. So had I put refrigeration on, I probably would have stuck a couple solar panels on as well.
Autopilot, is it just from one point to another and then you reprogram it? Or
It steers by a compass. So you enter in a compass course and it steers to that compass course. I think this one you can also tie into your GPS so it would follow a track, or you could steer to a waypoint. But we didn't have it set up that way. Magnetic compass bearing, right?
When you would set anchor and go to shore on your little dinghy, did you lock that up to a tree or just leave it on the boat?
Great question. One of the biggest problems for cruisers in French Polynesia is theft. The people are wonderful down there, but what's yours is mine, so theft is a big problem. So we knew about that before we left, so I took about a 20-foot cable with me that I ran through the engine and then through the boat, and then we chain it to something when we went ashore. And unfortunately, you have to do that. We met a number of cruisers who had dinghies stolen. Some in Moorea is particularly bad. They'll come through about once a month when they get a new batch of cruisers through, and they'll steal anything that they can grab on the boat. Dinghies, engines, diapers, anything that's hanging on the line. It can be pretty bad. So
they'll swim out to your boat?
They come by boat. Come by boat in the middle of the night, and they'll go through the anchorage, and they'll, if someone doesn't discover them, And unfortunately, the authorities down there aren't really equipped to deal with that. The victims are transient. They're moving on.
The Asian fishermen you saw en route, they just mind their own business. They don't bother you at all.
Yeah, I think they're longliners. So they'll put their long lines out and tend to them overnight and then pick them up in the morning and then move on to someplace else. So we usually saw them en route, or in the middle of the night we'd see their lights as we sailed by. It is interesting. We saw 7 ships, and as we approached Hawaii, Matt, my crew member, said, "Oh, we better keep a sharp lookout as we approach Hawaii. We're going to see more boats." And I said, "You want to bet? I bet you we don't see another boat." We're still 300 miles south of here. I said, "I bet we don't see another boat before we get to Kona." So we made a bet. Sure enough, we never saw another boat because the fishermen are all outside the 200-mile economic zone. Once you get inside, then it's only American fishermen, and we don't have many of those because it's a tough way to earn a living here. So.
Do you worry about running over there long lines?
I think the lines are deeper. We didn't see any this trip. Normally they're buoyed, and then they're connected 8 or 10 feet below the surface. I think that's how they work.
Your draft is less than that.
Or 5 feet. I don't think it's particularly dangerous. It would be a real nuisance, but it's not like hitting a reef or anything.
Well, Mr. Leary, unlike Gauguin and Thor Heyerdahl, you did find paradise, right? The woman you love, and then your father-in-law. I mean, that's good. No. And we want to thank you for, you noticed everyone enjoyed the presentation. And it was not like he had this presentation in his pocket. He modeled it for us. Thank you.
Thank you again.